What if I told you that a single $10,000 investment, with zero additional contributions, could turn into over $170,000 in your lifetime, without you doing anything? No extra work. No extra money added. Just time. Most people hear that and assume it's some kind of financial trick or misleading math. It's not. It's one of the most well-documented, consistently proven forces in all of personal finance. And the people who understand it early are playing an entirely different game than everyone else. The people who don't, they spend decades working harder than they ever needed to. This is the story of compound growth. And by the end of this video, you'll see exactly how it works, why it's so counterintuitive, and the one mistake that quietly kills it for most people. Let's start with a name. Albert Einstein. Whether or not he actually said it, the quote has survived because it's simply true, is often credited with calling compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. He supposedly followed that up by saying those who understand it earn it, and those who don't pay it. Hold on to that second part. We'll come back to it. So what actually is compounding? At its most basic level, compounding is what happens when your returns start generating their own returns. You invest money, it earns interest or grows in value, and then that growth itself begins to grow. It sounds simple. The math behind it is simple. But the effect it produces over time is anything but. Here's a concrete example. You invest $10,000 at an average annual return of 7%, roughly the inflation-adjusted historical average of the U.S. stock market. In year 1, you earn $700. Now you have $10,700. In year 2, you earn 7% on that $10,700, not just on your original $10,000. That's $749. You have $11,449. In year 3, you earn 7% on $11,449. And so on. For the first few years, the difference looks almost insulting. You're adding a few hundred extra dollars. You might wonder what all the fuss is about. But here's where compounding reveals its true nature: it's not linear. It's exponential. And exponential growth is something the human brain is genuinely bad at predicting. By year 10, your $10,000 has become roughly $19,700. You've nearly doubled your money without adding a single dollar. By year 20, it's around $38,700. By year 30, it's crossed $76,000. And by year 40, it's sitting at over $149,000. You invested $10,000 once. You did nothing. 40 years later, that's nearly 15 times your original money. But here's what makes this truly astonishing. Look at where the growth actually comes from. In the first 20 years, your $10,000 grew by about $28,700. In the last 20 years, the same amount of time, it grew by over $110,000. The second half of the journey produces almost 4 times as much wealth as the first half. The longer the money sits, the faster it moves. This is the exponential curve in action. There's a concept that captures this beautifully called the Rule of 72. Divide 72 by your annual return rate, and you get the approximate number of years it takes your money to double. At 6% returns, your money doubles every 12 years. At 8%, every 9 years. At 12%, every 6 years. What this means in practice is that each doubling builds on top of all the previous ones. $10,000 becomes $20,000. Then $40,000. Then $80,000. Then $160,000. You're not adding $10,000 each time, you're doubling an ever larger number. Now here's where reinvestment becomes the actual engine of all of this. Compounding doesn't happen automatically just because you own an investment. It happens because you put your returns back to work. In a savings account, that means letting the interest accumulate rather than withdrawing it. In the stock market, it means reinvesting dividends instead of taking them as cash. In a retirement account, it means not touching the money, letting every gain roll into the next cycle of growth. When companies pay dividends, many brokerage platforms allow you to turn on automatic dividend reinvestment. Every time a dividend payment hits your account, it immediately buys more shares. Those additional shares generate their own dividends, which buy more shares, which generate more dividends. You don't manage this manually. You set it once, and the machine runs itself. Over decades, dividend reinvestment alone can account for a significant portion of total stock market returns. In some analyses, more than half of the total gains from long-term index investing. This is why financial advisors say time in the market beats timing the market. The person who invests $10,000 at 25 and never adds another dollar will, in many scenarios, end up with more money than the person who waits until 35 and tries to make up the difference by investing twice as much. The 25-year-old had 10 extra years of compounding. That gap is almost impossible to close. To put numbers to that, invest $10,000 at 25 with a 7% return, and by 65 you have roughly $149,000. Wait until 35 to start, and you'd need to invest about $20,000, double, just to arrive at the same destination. Those 10 years of early compounding were worth $10,000. This is why starting early isn't just good advice. It's mathematically the most powerful financial decision most people can make. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. There's a villain in this story, and it's quietly working against compounding every single day. Fees, inflation, taxes, and most dangerously, withdrawals. Fees are particularly insidious because they compound in reverse. A fund charging 1% annually versus 0.05% sounds like a negligible difference. Over 30 years on a $100,000 portfolio, that 1% fee costs you roughly $175,000 in lost compounding. You paid for the privilege of watching your future wealth evaporate slowly. This is why low-cost index funds have fundamentally changed how smart investors think about long-term growth. Withdrawals are even more damaging because they don't just remove money, they remove that money's entire future compounding potential. Pulling $5,000 from your investment account at age 30 doesn't cost you $5,000. At a 7% return, by age 65 that $5,000 would have become nearly $53,000. Every dollar you remove early costs you not what it's worth today, but what it would have grown into. This is also why debt is so dangerous. When you carry high-interest debt, a credit card charging 20% annually, compounding is working against you with exactly the same force it works for investors. The balance grows. The interest charges grow. The total you owe accelerates. The same mathematical engine that builds wealth for investors destroys it for borrowers. There is no investment strategy that reliably beats 20% compounding debt. Paying it off is always the highest return move available. If you want to put this into practice immediately, the steps are straightforward. Start as early as possible, even if the amount feels embarrassingly small. Turn on dividend reinvestment across all your accounts. Choose low-fee index funds to ensure fees aren't silently eroding your compounding base. And resist the urge to pull money out. Every withdrawal is a future fortune you're spending today. The math does not care if you believe in it. It doesn't care how much you earn, where you went to school, or how sophisticated your strategy is. It just runs. Quietly. Continuously. And the people who put it to work early and leave it alone are the ones who look back at retirement and wonder how they ended up with so much more than they expected. If you want to understand the next piece of this, how to actually structure a portfolio that maximizes compounding while protecting against the crashes that can set the clock back years. That video is already here. Watch it next. Because compounding is powerful, but only if what you've built survives long enough to let it run.